allows you to buy or sell securities on the Altex exchange from anywhere in Uganda via USSD. Step 1. To buy, dial star 292 hash. Step 2. Select buy. Step 3. Select the product you would like to buy. For example, bonds. Step 4. Select your preferred maturity year. Step 5. Select the bond you would like to buy. Step 6. Input an amount of 15,000 Ugandan shillings or more. Step 7. Your order has been forwarded for processing. And finally, Step 8. Your order has been confirmed.
Welcome back, and of course 3 minutes past 8 a.m. and of course it is a Friday. I'm here to remind you what day it is, so definitely get your day started with Smart Men's Business. We're here to give you information that you need regarding business. In case you missed out of anything, trust me, I will tell you what you missed. About today's topic is entirely going to be about climate change. We're advocating for climate change, renewable energy, other solutions, possible solutions. Wherever you are, if you feel like there is no tree, plant a tree. You know, be a patriot. Be a patriot in your country. Plant a tree and grow flowers around your home. You know, it's easy things. Use gas, or if your gas is expensive, use briquettes. I hear it's affordable, so definitely, and also it starts with you actually. Climate change starts with you. If you've been complaining about the seasonal changes, it's up to you. You're opting for charcoal. Where do you think charcoal comes from? It comes from the trees that are cut down each and every day to get the charcoal that you're consuming, that you're using on a daily. So definitely, I urge you to be an advocate for this. And of course, right about now, I'm joined with Andrew Barije, but of course, the markets on Zabu are going to be open just 10 minutes from now, 8:15 a.m. And of course, they tell you there's no hassle. You can reach out to them if you dial *29 hash and follow the prompts. So definitely, if you want to invest in government bonds securities, you can invest as low as 15,000 Ugandan shillings. So working hours from 8:15 a.m. to 3:15 p.m. You can reach out to Zabu from Monday to Friday, except for public holidays and weekends. So tomorrow, today is a Friday, this is the last day to invest and work with Zabu. So starting Monday is going to be the starting day for you to invest in government bonds and securities, of course, powered by Altex East Africa. They tell you to do something new. It's the year 2023. Good morning, Andrew. Thank you for the traffic update. I mean, I think people are a bit relaxed, you know, they go at their own pace, but the traffic was slow.
Yeah, it's really pretty cool in there, and of course, as people are preparing for the celebrations of the president, as Yuri Kaguta said, some of the routes actually get realized of being a little bit cut off. That is from that. So, most especially for those people that are using Kololo, you know, so there is quite some huge, I mean, there is some huge congestion actually. So you'll have to wait for quite some time, some minutes. That is for you to, to reach effectively. It's
like a public holiday for some people.
It's a little bit, of course, being a Friday, it's a little bit chiller and all that. Despite the blockage, there is not still, the effect is not that much as compared to if it was a Monday. We have celebrations, and part of the city, within the city center rather, is blocked. Would have a much more bigger condition, but it was slightly, because it's a Friday and it's a holiday season at the same time. So that's why it was calm in some sort of a way, despite
that's really good. And of course, today we're going to be looking at climate change. What do you think really is the situation in Africa, or maybe globally? All this attributed to global warming, plastics, industrial areas, the cars, fossil fuels, people are into oil, so definitely we are going to be dissecting climate change today, possible solutions, what different nations are doing about climate change, even us as Uganda, what are the things that we are doing to advocate for climate change, you know, disposing of plastics where they're supposed to go, reusing the plastics, very important, instead of throwing them and then the soil That is one of the contributing factors why the soil loses its fertility.
Absolutely.
Various plastics, very many things that hinder us from getting our seasonal rains and good sunshine. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe before we even get into that discussion, somebody would be asking themselves, well, what is the evidence of climate change? I mean, some may not really be trying to connect to some sort of a way, but it's quite very evident. You can actually see there is a, seasons are interchanging themselves. Today, it's quite really hard to understand what season is it going to be. Is it going to be this way? Is it going to be that way the other day? For example, we gave a real life scenario here in Uganda this month, this year, January. We know it to be a hot month, but we had a rainy, or sometimes it's a little hot, but of course the biggest percentage was dominated, that is by the rain.
It really affects people doing business, mostly those that are into agriculture. The seasonal changes.
And also we've seen this flooding, most especially in areas in, I think we had east.
This bridge, the recent bridge?
The recent bridge, well, that would also be a good example, but we had serious, floodings, that is in eastern Uganda, where massive people lost cattle, herds, and all that livestock was actually lost, which actually led to quite huge losses. I mean, we're evaluating about livestock worth 50 million and above, which was lost during that time. And at the same time, once this trend actually continues, we are likely to have much more heavier rains, which are likely to lead to massive destruction of property. That is the most especially, even within the urban centers. We've seen, I saw actually a video. I'm giving real life scenarios here. I saw a video of some shop, I think it was in town, close to the No Park, and water was just flowing in, and actually somebody made a joke and said this is a water mall. It was just flowing in that. But all this is as a result of climate change. The funny thing about this is that once these rains come, due to a time they're not supposed to be flowing, that means there is a much more damage that they are likely to cause as a result of that, and that has quite some long-term implications.
Well, of course, we are still going to be discussing this, but of course, let's get inspired for the day.
All right, this is a part of the business tips here. It says set goals.
For every state
of the way.
There's a difference between goals and a goal and a vision. They're different. So goals are meant to be achieved on maybe a daily basis.
Goals are short term.
Short term. Goals are short term, so you can, set a goal for the day, what you expect to have done at the end of the day, at the end of your closing time. Okay, so wake up in the morning with a plan. Set a plan. By the end of 4 p.m. I'll be done with work.
I'll be done with my work. Okay. Now our business quote of the day says, "Believe you can, and you are halfway there." I think we've done that before. Yeah, it's what it is, the way it is there. Just believe and you'll be there.
Well, of course, that's said and done, and of course, we're going to, like I said, we're still talking about climate change, and of course, today's special report is going to be majorly on the climate change, and of course, what do Ugandans think of the climate change that is actually happening in our country, Uganda? And of course, we posed a question right there. And of course, people are going to be giving us their opinions on what they think could be the reason as to why there is climate change, or maybe there are seasonal changes in the country, and maybe provide solutions, in through opinions. That is when people give us their heartfelt reasons and emotions are put out there, and possible solutions would be provided. Well, of course, still on climate change, like we had talked about, we're going to be discussing, and in this very hour, we're going to be looking at the possible comparing Kenya's Africa. Kenya was hosting the African Climate Change Summit 2023, and of course comparing it with what is happening in Dubai right about now. You know, there is a huge, I mean, isn't it coincidental that the two are happening at the same time? And of course, as we're waiting for the COP27, which is usually COP28.
We're having the COP28 of late in Dubai. That's happening in Dubai.
Yes. And one is set to be commenced in November or December. So definitely, there is a reason as to why this is all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
That means there is need for more action.
Exactly.
Yeah. And of course, getting into this special report right there, of course, the question posed was, how is climate change going to affect our economy? How does it affect our economy? People in the business industry, people that are into agriculture, how is this affecting you? Do you even know that it affects you? Or you just see it raining and you're like, oh, the showers of rain are here. And of course, you were not prepared for the day how it's going to begin. So this is Samuel Chimunda, and it says extreme weather events driven by climate change, like droughts and floods, have the potential to force communities to relocate. Quite interesting right there, like what happened in eastern Uganda. People had to relocate and of course find for better, convenient places. And of course this can place significant pressure on resources in both urban and rural areas, potentially resulting in conflicts and a strained socioeconomic environment. Definitely right there. Thank you for the beautiful, insightful comment. It's really heavy. And now this is Calvin Huntington's, and he says Uganda's tourism industry, particularly wildlife and nature-based tourism, is a significant contributor to the economy. Now, with climate change, it can impact biodiversity and ecosystems, affecting the availability of wildlife for tourism. Much, of course, dry areas right there can affect the nature and of course wildlife, because some of them rely on pasture. So this one says Uganda relies on hydropower for a substantial part of its electricity generation, and of course climate change will definitely affect water availability in rivers. True, leading to reduced hydropower production. And of course he says this could result in power shortages and increased electricity costs. Very, very true right there. With the global warming that is happening, really, trust me. This is Waiso Raymond 95. This says climate-induced events such as drought and floods can lead to the displacement of communities, just like the one before I'd said. Now this can strain resources both in urban and rural areas, potentially leading to conflicts and a need for additional government spending on disaster relief and rehabilitation effects. You see, of course, disaster relief, when people were affected, they had to get into their pockets and look for possible means of helping out these affected people. So that is how climate change is affecting the economy. Displacement, businesses are affected, I mean, nature as well is affected. So everything goes wrong with climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. With climate change, that everything goes wrong. And what really causes that? Sometimes the use of not the best alternative sources of energy probably can lead to that. But away from that, still, in relation to what is happening in Dubai, the COP28 is slated in there, as we try to link it to what's happening in Kenya, that is with the Africa Climate Change Summit, which was held in Nairobi in there. If we try to link the fact that the United Arab Emirates is investing about $4.5 billion that is in to finance initiative for clean energy projects, that is in Africa here. Now, of course, the UAE pledged about 4.5 billion US dollars to help speed up the development of clean energy projects, that is within the continent of Africa. Now, we're going to see that Abu Dhabi's clean energy company, that is Masdar, the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development, that is Etihad Credit, and Dubai Best Renewable Energy Company, that is AMEA Power, will provide, of course, these funds to be there. Now, Africa, an investment platform established, Africa 50 rather, an investment platform established by African governments and the African, that is the Africa Development Bank, also joined the initiative, and the United Arab Emirates said at the Africa Climate Summit. That was, of course, this week on Tuesday. And the one upside factor is that Africa is a continent that is full of minerals, but only contributes 3%, that is, of the world's total energy. You know, that is 3% the share. Now, of course, the platform which was founded, that is to help solve the continent's infrastructure problems, will identify, of course, initial projects and connect with organizations which are responsible for putting into effect. That is the statement. Now here we're talking about the Africa 50, that is which is an investment platform. Now, still further in Dubai investing 4.5 billion US dollars in Africa for alternative clean energy. This will also reduce the barriers to investment, and therefore countries must restore the financial sustainability, that is of local utilities, while modernizing basic energy infrastructure. As a result of that.
Well, of course, still into this report regarding climate change, ADF actually offered to provide $25 billion for climate change, for climate financing, and of course that was according to DESINA, and of course you see, climate change is being facilitated for. There is always financing for climate financing. So definitely, if you're out there wondering why this sudden involvement of African countries, because I mean, if you're willing actually to advocate for this, there is always financing for it.
Yeah, there is.
You know, the entities that are responsible for financing this change. So now, of course, the African Development Bank committed to providing $25 billion towards climate financing, and of course at DESINA, the firm's president said. Now, speaking during the second day of the African Climate Change Summit, which was held in Nairobi, still being held in Nairobi, he called for change of global financial architecture to prioritize the needs for Africa, while also urging delegates to mobilize resources for climate financing. Now, Africa must use its natural gas, okay, combine it with renewable resources, that is according to him. Then he says, we must ensure that Africa's food agriculture are climate resilient. No more consuming GMOs. We have to have not using more these toxic fertilizers, and maybe using intoxicants for our food. It's affecting our health in the long run. So if the soil is fertile, definitely we're going to go back to the natural foods, without additional fertilizers, of making them test even different. You know, when you put in fertilizer in the soil, there's a way it tests very much different. You have to go back to the old ways of mulching, of the old ways of agriculture.
Yeah.
I mean, plant a tree. You can see people right there planting, preparing to plant trees around, because some of those are arid areas. There's scarcity of water. The lands are dry. So if they could, plant a tree, they could have climate change within the shortest possible time, and they could be okay. Yeah,
very true. And still, maybe to add on that briefly, we see that more than 52 green hydrogen projects have been announced in Africa. That is with production set to reach about 7.2 million tons. That is by the end of 2035. Now, that's the Norway Best Consultancy firm saying in a report that was March this very year. Now, the developing countries require about 1.7 trillion US dollars per year in the clean energy sector, but only managed to attract, that is a foreign direct investment worth 554, that is billion US dollars in 2022. Now the UN, that is the UN, the UNCTAD, the UN Intergovernmental Organization, that promotes the interests of developing countries in world trade, said that is in its World Investment Report, that is in July. Now Africa will play a fundamental role, that is in attaining the goals of the Paris Agreement on climate change, and of course officials said on Monday at the Africa Climate Summit, which was in Kenya. Now, I would see that the world must ensure that climate finance is more available, affordable, and accessible to all developing countries, that is including those in Africa. That is according to Dr. Al Jabbar, Kenya's, that is Dr. Al Jabbar, of course, the president of the COP28. Now, of course, Kenya's President William Ruto, an African Union chairman, and Musa Mahamat also backed up the president of the COP28. Of course, which is slated to be held in Dubai to discuss these matters further. All right, now it's exactly at 23 minutes past 8, and you're still watching Smart Men's Business. I'm Aljo Barije here with Masika Time, and definitely today we've been discussing much more matters to do with climate change. Now, the biggest question in here is to ask ourselves, with the initiatives that Kenya is actually undertaking, how far has Uganda gone to execute its, to play its duty in this? What is the role of Uganda in the whole strategy of climate change in Africa? Now these are quite key stakeholders, which, key questions which stakeholders should be ready to actually face and understand and implement accordingly, because being lagged behind, remember by 2030, we shall have really gained energy transition. Unsurprisingly, the nations, most especially Uganda, developing nations, are looking at oil, which most of the developing countries are actually shifting away from. So we need to have a balance in some sort of a way. And where does that leave us when it comes to demand, global demand? Because once the demand is not there, that means it will all be in vain. Or we could find another alternative way we can actually utilize what we call the oil, what they consider the black gold, in some sort of a way. Well, at this point in time, Smart Men's Business is going to take a short break, and of course we shall be returning with business and entertainment and sports shortly after this break.
Smart 24, driving business.